Issue 134. Sonic is told by Dr. Quack that the implant letting him learn any language also bonded with his nervous system, meaning that really was an implant after all. Good for him. Not sure why he didn't realize it was an implant then if it was called an implant. After Sonic looks really weird in an exaggerated way to make him look like he's freaking out, Dr. Quack reassures him that he's fine, and trying to remove the implant would do more harm than good anyways. He says that so many things have changed, and for some reason he lists being at war with Eggman as one of those things, even though that's literally always been the case in the comic. In fact, didn't they say Sonic knew the meaning of war before issue 50? Dr. Quack then explains why he has an eye patch while calling it a mere shiner for some reason. He had accidentally stepped on a landmine while tending to the wounded in battle, causing the King to finally step in and telling him to get out of the front lines. Why was he there in the first place? They can't afford to lose what might be their only doctor, since, we never actually get to see any doctors other than him. They'd be ruined. More importantly, how did stepping on a landmine only cost him his eye? Would that just obliterate him? Worst landmine ever. And I can't understand why you wouldn't just have a cyborg guy. I guess he's one of those types of people who, probably like me, would be too superficial to have a cyborg guy if it looks scary. But couldn't he just make a cyborg guy that looks just like an organic guy? Technology can do literally anything in this universe. Why does anyone have an eye patch? After Sonic reveals to his friends and family at the castle that he's still alive because he didn't think to do that before going to Dr. Quack, Sally says while her eyes have no corneas that she hopes he'll never get his life threatened again. Foreshadowing. Then Sonic and his parents get irritated by the paparazzi, who bombard him with a million questions, and Sonic is told that fortunately his parents left his old room untouched because they couldn't bring themselves to change it when they thought he was gone. Sonic then panics the next day after learning that his implant can actually let him understand what Mutsuki's saying, and has the remark, "Mutsuki can talk! I know a lot of things have changed while I was away, but this is ridiculous!" Which I chuckled at. Then Sonic tells his family what he experienced in space in a brief recap, where it's explained that the injuries Jules had received before being roboticized were so serious that the process was reversed to kill him. I guess that makes sense, but the problem is that I would assume the roboticizer healed injuries by virtue of turning skin to metal and stuff. So why would reversing the process return the injuries, instead of just turning the metal that replaced the old wounds into skin? And so on and so forth. I mean, the BAM didn't have access to the same roboticizer that turned everyone into robots, but they were still just as capable of de-roboticizing them, breaking that old rule in the comic about how only the same machine that roboticized you can cure you because it still contains your body's data on what it was once like, so it would know what to do. It seems so arbitrary, just as confusing as Tails' father going back to having only one eye after being de-roboticized, instead of the metallic eye replacing his Lachman eye simply turning to an organic eye. The de-roboticizer used on him couldn't have known he used to not have an eye. It should have just made his replacement eye organic like every other part of his body. But instead, de-roboticizing is seeming to work less on logic and more on they reverse a magic spell rules. I'm kind of amused by Mutsuki talking, I guess. It's cute. Then Tails adorably hugs Sonic, excited at him being okay, and explains in a huge text box that's justified by him having a cute motor mouth moment to personality everything he did recently. Which includes explaining that when he came home after the riddles with Adam, Sonic wouldn't wake up from his sleep to talk to him. So he decided to work in the tornado. After they briefly cut away to Far Away with everyone in silhouette to spare us some recap, Tails is really shocked, staring at the idea that his parents are alive on the other side of the universe. I get why he's crying, being sorely reminded that he had no parents his whole life, but why is Sonic crying? Pity? Tails is given a watch from his parents and pushes a button on it to get a hologram of his parents, who tell him that they love him very much. By the way, how long have they had this watch? Because they seemed to have it ready for Sonic the minute they bumped into him, and they didn't have time to go home and get anything before they give him a package with it. Did they make it a long time ago and on the slim chance that they might get to Tails and always carried it with them just in case? That was convenient. We then see Mina singing at a concert, and the king shakes hands with Sonic, welcoming him back, and says to the crowd that in an effort to fortify the kingdom against Eggman, he and his wife will depart Knothole in a few weeks on a tour of the planet, with Station Square as their final stop. Why would they ever endanger themselves like that? And yet Sally doing stuff to be useful is too dangerous. He explains that during their absence, Sally would be the acting ruler. Mina then hugs Sonic, saying it's great to see him again, which gets Sally annoyed and jealous. I really hate any time a character's eyes are drawn like that, by the way. That's what eyelids are for. It looks really weird and I don't know what they were thinking. It's hard to sympathize with Sally when she's looking like this thing. Mina says that the king naturally assigned her to sing for the people and troops as a morale booster, and that this guy named Ash is her new manager and boyfriend. So her boyfriend Ash Ketchum here has a position of power over her. That's great. Then we see the queen saying that she's not sure if Sally's ready for the pressure of ruling a kingdom yet, saying, "You saw how she reacted after Sonic was wounded." The king simply says that they have no other choice, and Dr. Quack says she's up to it. He had her examined by Dr. Quack. What, did he lie? Was it a psychological examination? Because you'd think he would have learned something. Sally then looks really sad while about to say, "Sonic, which implies that because she was sad, she was about to try to tell Sonic how worried she is about him getting killed again. Unfortunately, she was promptly interrupted by Sonic's friends, and then immediately decides not to say it because she's in public. After a few panels are wasted recapping the Tails and Fiona situation when we already know that and they lead to nothing, Sonic awkwardly says to Rotor that he's been keeping busy since wisely retiring from away missions. Then Rotor says, "You bet! Now I just invent doodads for you field agents to take along." His second line is so unhappy, but he's acting so happy it's confusing. Why is he all excited about this? I wasn't sure at all what was happening in the next few panels. It's finally explained that Rotor's device had created some green fireworks in the sky that somehow looked like Sonic and Sally being together. Sonic finally congratulates Jeffrey and Hershey on their marriage, and Jeffrey says that they're going off on a classified mission for the king, to which Hershey adds that it's their honeymoon. How is that a mission? Do they just love their job so much they consider a regular mission to be a honeymoon? Sonic finally asks Bunny why she and Patch broke up. I like the line, "Hope you didn't get that nasty facial scar from you." That's such a relatable line, it makes perfect sense for him to say. Bunny explains that only Dr. Quack knows where he got it, and they broke up because the war changed him. It's weird that she'd buy that so easily, considering the change must have taken place literally in the course of a day at best. It wasn't exactly a gradual process. This is a guy with a completely different personality from Antoine. He's short-tempered, can't take criticism, stone serious, doesn't seem to care about anyone. You'd think, with all their experiences with fake robot duplicates and Mammoth Mongol making fake illusions, the first thing they'd all think when seeing Antoine acting like his normal, nervous self one minute and completely different the next is he's a fake. Did they think him not being a robot suddenly made him the same person? I could understand them buying that he changed over a gradual course, but not that suddenly. Anyways, the king says that he wants Patch to accompany him and his wife as commander of the elite guard on their world tour. So he's not totally making a big mistake with the tour because he's got bodyguards, at least. He then explains his new attitude makes him an excellent candidate for the job, implying that he thinks Patch is more badass. Well, I can understand that. I can understand his reasoning. I guess Patch replaced Antoine pretty recently since the king is calling it new. Then, once again, Sonic and Sally are interrupted from trying to have a moment to talk as a news reporter wants to photograph them. They briefly stop to do so, and then the talk begins. Sally explains that her overseeing the daily operations of the city will be a tremendous responsibility for her to bear, so she wants Sonic to rule by her side while they're away. This is a pretty stupid thing of her to expect of Sonic, since he's obviously the type to prefer thrill-seeking and adventure to just sitting around in a chair doing paperwork and boring meetings. And if she knew him at all, as someone who loves him should, she would know that. In fact, didn't he make it blatantly obvious that he wasn't into this at the start of the peacetime arc? He was literally falling asleep at the council, and she thinks she should get together with him? You could not imagine a more incompatible couple, and that's why I'm looking forward to this. Sonic reasons with an immediately irritated like a mood swing Sally that if I don't fight Eggman, who will? Well, everyone else fought Eggman for a year and things magically turned out to be just fine, somehow. I'm sure the bullshit would have just continued. But I don't blame him for thinking this since he's more competent at fighting robots than everyone else by a country mile. Why couldn't he just say, "I'll roll with you, but I'll have to take breaks to fight too"? Of course, even if he said that, the fire would still be thrown because ruling Sally is not really what the fight's going to be about. She doesn't really care about him ruling by her side. You can't go risking your life in battle if we're going to have a real future together! I'm surprised she made it that clear what her problem was. She's terrified of Sonic dying on her. She's had more close calls than she can count. Not just including the more recent two and the Zorda thing either. It was obvious from the minute we saw Sally again that she wasn't quite the same person as before, being more emotional, prone to bursting into tears. And the fact that she was regularly crying as statue as Sonic proves it. After all those close calls, thinking that Sonic actually died broke her. At least temporarily, because it proved to her that she can't keep deluding herself and thinking he'd always be fine. If Sonic keeps risking his life, eventually he might get killed and they couldn't have a future together. Makes perfect sense that she gets scared of that because one of her main personality traits in the very beginning has been caution to the point of paranoia. And she's been showing a lack of faith in Sonic's ability to win, fight, and stay alive consistently throughout the whole series. Everything was building up to this moment. I'm so glad this is finally happening. I thought this would have happened 34 issues ago. Although I obviously would have enjoyed this issue a lot more if they didn't decide to draw Sally's face with no eyeballs. And her corneas not properly filling the skin-colored area where they're clearly supposed to be at. I get that she's angry and that's how they show that in anime, I guess. But this isn't anime. This just makes me wonder why, realistically, getting mad would make your eyeballs disappear, and not go blind somehow because she's not freaking out about it. Then Sally immediately mood swings back to looking genuinely sad and crying, saying, "I don't want you to do it anymore." Well, I think these are less genuine mood swings and more that she's acting angry to hide her overwhelming fear, anger born of worry. So the anger was fake. Just because you're screaming doesn't necessarily mean you're angry. Her sadness was her real emotion all along. Then she promptly reveals just how psychologically shaken she was by almost losing Sonic for good, by saying the creepy line, "Stay with me, please, my love? Say you will." She sounds like a clingy, deranged stalker girl, the kind of girlfriend who might snap and cut you if you break up with her. And keep in mind, I like Sally. I really do. She's so complex. I'm not saying this to say she's the worst character ever, like some people. I'm saying this because I find it fascinating the fact that they cared enough to portray the realistic effects of high stress on a stress-susceptible person to the point of her demonstrating symptoms of an emotional breakdown. Everything from her supposed chickification coming from her being open with her feelings after Sonic kissed her in issue 50, to her rectifying that openness of emotions after dozens of high-stress situations by bottling up all of her emotions, becoming the definition of a stoic, to gradually coming out of it, and just when you think she might be fine, Sonic seems to die on her, and for a year she's crying at his statue. How do you think she's gonna react? Sonic sheds a tear apologizing to her, as he probably knows deep down what's actually coming, as he chooses having fun being a hero over her. Good choice. Too bad for Sally, she's too emotionally fragile to handle the lack of a supporting boyfriend. She snaps and slaps him, having a minor mental breakdown at what he just said, saying that she should have known he'd be selfish. What do you expect? And somehow Sonic responds selfish instead of, "Hey, you hit me!" First off, I don't really get why Sally doing this is the worst thing ever, aside from the obvious that she's normally a very righteous person and friends should never hit friends. I wouldn't really trust the friend who would hit me, but what I mean is, girls slap guys in the media all the time. You know, "You pig!" Slap. So like, why is this suddenly so blown out of proportion just because she does it? She's always such a goody-goody perfectionist trying to force herself to always do good all the time, to the point of being a people pleaser humoring Mina. Nobody can keep that up without a single mistake for long. Of course she'd snap. And it's not like this is a regular event either. Also, I'd like to point out that Sally did something much worse than slapping him earlier. Remember when she hit Sonic over the head with a stick for saving her from Robotnik? It made him all dizzy and brain damaged? That's the most horrible thing Sally's ever done. And she never shows any regret for that. So a mere slap? Please. Early on or not, that was much worse because she didn't even have an emotional breakdown to justify it. I'd rather people point at that moment as an excuse to hate Sally for something she did, because this is nothing in comparison. In fact, Bunny also did something much worse than slapping Sonic. She said she'd murder him with no hesitation one time. Why? Because she thought he screwed up trying to help his friends. And Antoine literally plotted against Sonic, putting him behind bars one time, with his response to seeing him roboticized being to gleefully say that he'll get court-martialed. Plenty of Sonic's friends have done much worse things than a mere slap that girls do to guys in the media all the time. More importantly, I know exactly why she's saying he's selfish. He's making her terrified of being killed fighting Eggman. and she's so absorbed in that from the trauma of almost losing him for good that's all she focuses on. She's not able to think straight. Of course, I understand Sonic's the one who's really right, as Sonic's being a hero is good for a lot more people than just her. She's the one being selfish, but she figures she needs the emotional support from him by him humoring her like this, failing to realize how ridiculous it is to restrain the most powerful, capable hero on the planet just because you want to protect him like a porcelain doll. If this was the same Sally that the comic started out with, then yeah, this would be unacceptable behavior from her. A huge out-of-character moment. And I used to take it at face value from people like Game Purists that this was a horrible, horrible thing. But in the context of the comic, after the kind of trauma she's been through, she's not exactly in the right state of mind right now. So I don't blame her one bit. We have had dozens of issues worth of foreshadowing to her snapping like this. And the fact that this didn't happen 35 issues ago is just a testament to how much she's been pushed over the edge. Because she already was pushed over the edge, multiple times over. This is long overdue. And I plan to explain exactly why. But first off, before I go on that long train of thought, let's continue with the rant. Sonic shows that he's not meek and pathetic like 06 Sonic or something by getting enraged with her, as he rightfully should, saying, "I sacrificed my life to save the planet, ended up on the far side of the universe because of it, did everything I could to get back, only to find out that I lost a whole year of my life, and now I just want to end the stupid war. How is that selfish?" I love that line. But seriously, I can accept the lack of comments because he's talking fast in a rant. But where is the exclamation mark before the word how? Sally says angrily with tears streaming down her face in tranquil fury, "Do you know what it was like believing you were dead? It completely broke my heart. Watching Mecha hurt you brought it all back, and I refuse to have my heart broken again, Sonic." How much more clearly do you have it spelled out for you? It's not even fanon for me at this point. There's no extrapolation here. This was all intentional. Asking if punching out Eggman's light matters more to Sonic than being with her, she shows selfishness again, blinded by how upset she is after a whole lifetime trying to be unselfish, and runs off, saying the great line, "Then he can have you all to himself." That's actually really clever. Now finally I can explain. Here's every major problem she had leading to the slap, all of it starting after Robotnik was gone, when she logically thought she'd be free from tragedies. But you're going to see that it just keeps piling on until we get to the 23rd entry on the list. First off, in issue 53, she gets a lot of pressure put on her from having an entire city of people to rule after taking back Mobotropolis, because the Robians are freed. Before telling Sonic she was worried about that, she said to Sonic that she didn't want to worry him with her dumb problems, showing that she planned to keep her worries to herself, proving that she normally does this kind of thing. So far, this seems pretty minor, but they add up. Second, Sonic leaving her without him to find Ixis for weeks. This has been regularly shown by me as the representative images of her chickification. Normally, Sally would never be so open and honest about her feelings as to admit to Sonic that he's her best friend somehow, ask when he's going to come back after leaving her, and then seem all depressed asking what she's going to do in the meantime. By this point, it's the most clear that after Sonic kissed Sally and let her know that she was always allowed to start showing affection to him, she's opened the floodgates a little and been more honest about her emotions instead of being a tsundere. Problem is, that opens the door to her being more easily stressed out, making her more vulnerable, when she's normally been bottling everything up to appear calm and collected most of the time. Only time she broke down crying out right before this all was when she was overcome with despair because her father's crystallized and stuff, and she hugged Rotor and stuff. I think there might have been more times, but this is the most memorable. That leads up to 3. Elias replaces Sally as the King's right-hand man, when the King was bad enough from being in power replacing her as the leader of the Freedom Fighters, and keeping her on a need-to-know basis since he came back. Now with Elias there, she's even less in power than before. And this is a problem because literally her whole purpose in life, and the way that she makes herself useful, is by being a leader. Now she can't even do that. That's not going to be good for the self-esteem. Her whole worth is undermined. And now for the first really major problem. 4. Worry about her tubed mother, especially as her condition worsens. This and the King problem led to her blowing up at Knuckles in the King and the Knuckles comic, saying Knux somehow should have known and told her about her comatose mother, and ranting at her father in one panel till she says, "Whatever happened to the loving, caring father I used to know?" She's been having that need-to-know basis problem not being totally in power for a long time, and she's barely gonna get a chance to rant about it. Most of the time, she just keeps it to herself to be polite. 5 would be that Knothole's population, all the free Robians, were kidnapped by Eggman and re-brainwashed with only Sonic's parents returning right away. This doesn't directly affect her, but she must have felt pretty bad for Sonic, and it was still a major setback that took a while to resolve. 6 is a big one. Eggman replaces Robotnik. Massive disappointment for Sally since she thought she'd be done with this kind of thing and never have to deal with it again. But no problem, she can handle it. She's been fighting Robotnik for years. 7. Eggman takes over Mobotropolis right after that, taking the Robians with them. So the Mobians all have to go back to Knothole. It feels like everything her team accomplished in issue 50 has been robbed of her, after Mobotropolis seemed so promising too. 8. The Brotherhood don't agree to help fight Eggman because the Acorn Kingdom will be holding back against them, instead of using the latest munitions technology. After this, Sally doubts being friends with Knuckles out of nowhere because he's not a freedom fighter. How could I ever call you a friend after that? Of course, it's just for one issue, never referenced again, but it shows the kind of stress she's going through that she would snap like that for just one issue. All of this is nothing compared to what comes after this. All in one issue. 9. Sally finds out her brother was kidnapped by Eggman while she was gone on the SA1 adaptation, and her father hadn't told her until she came back, adding to the whole make no basis thing. 10. Her mother is getting prepared for intensive surgery with the cure to her illness, which worries Sally enough to make her hug Sonic after ordering that he come see her. Then she looks really worried in a praying stance after Sonic says, Sal? To no response. And 11. She reluctantly lets an injured Antoine go to Mercia with Bunny and Amy to confront Antoine's roboticized sub-boss father, just to humor them, despite the obvious danger to their lives. And breaks down sobbing in Rosie's arms right afterwards, obviously very worried. And why shouldn't she be? She's facing the possibility of losing her entire family in one day. Every major setback before this point was nothing compared to how this would feel. And just one issue later, you have 12. Her father is injured and now he needs surgery too, causing her to break down crying, tell Sonic that she trusted him to protect him, run away sobbing, and admit to Elliot with her arms around her knees, staring off into the distance in a fetal position that things have been spiraling out of control for a while now, after Rosie tells Sonic that her outburst was a result of the intense pressure she's been under. The very next issue after that, making this the 4th terrible thing in a row that's happened to her by the way, 13. Just when she thought everything was fine because her injured father was all happy with her mother waking up holding hands with him, it turns out that injury of his really was something to worry about because her father can't walk. Just when she gets her mother and brother back, something terrible has to happen. She really gets put through the ringer. This is the most miserable creator's pet ever, and she had no way of knowing that he'd be able to walk again later on. 14. After days of inexplicably not talking to or calling Sonic since then, Sally sees Mina kissing Sonic, and left unhappily before she could see Sonic backing away from her. This causes her to worry paranoidly that he might be cheating on her, or would move on from her even if he wasn't. And she sadly decides not to go up to Sonic after that, tries to avoid him, and treats him as if they're not even friends, being very distant for a while. She actually thinks back to this moment twice, looking upset. From this point on, starting with her learning that Kodos went nuts, she became stoic in her attempts to completely suppress all of her stresses and worries, looking blatantly emotionless next to surprised, emoting people. For dozens of issues after this, she seems to be like a zombie, saying a lot of lines looking emotionless when you'd expect her to be happy or sad or frightened or angry. And this has never really happened before. 15. She uses the Sword of Acorns to kill Kodos and tell Sonic that Arachnus, who had become good, died in front of her. She says this completely emotionlessly. 16. Nate is left behind in Robotropolis, sacrificing himself to let the heroes and Robians escape it. Nate was a friend of hers, she'd be sad to see him go. 17. Elias runs away because he doesn't want to rule and thinks Sally should, making Sally's mother cry. Sally blames it on her father not trusting her, saying her going to Robotropolis on a mission is preposterous, and so on. 18. She learns that the Station Square military defense system automatically sent missiles to destroy Robotropolis and Knothole, which would kill her and leave both areas uninhabitable from fallout, making everything she did pointless. Of course, Sonic saves Knothole, but Robotropolis is still left uninhabitable, and Nate, along with all the roboticized overlanders, are destroyed along with it. At the very least, after this happens, she stops her stoicism phase and starts to show emotion normally again. She's also going through the added stress of the Sword of Acorn trying to force her to see the future, creepily disrespecting her wishes, saying, "You have no choice." With her mother pulling her out of the source of all and hugging her while crying, leading to Sally gladly giving the sword away. 19. Sonic tells her that Tommy Turtle was destroyed in an explosion and admissions Sonic didn't wait for the Freedom Fighters to come join him in, so maybe she blamed herself. He was her childhood friend, I mean of course she'd be upset about that. 20. Then the whole thing with Mina starts up again when she witnesses Sonic gently touch Mina's face after singing in front of an audience in a band. 21. And the very next day she sees Mina and Sonic singing together, thinks, "I need to sit down." Clearly overwhelmed and unhappy that they're such a great pair. 22. Easily the biggest one. Zorda threatened to destroy the world, and Sonic seems to sacrifice his life to stop the world's destruction. You'd think this would finally be what makes Sally snap, but it doesn't. Although she's really sad for a while. But it's the last big tragedy she can take. 23rd. And the last straw. After Sally finally gets Sonic back when she thought she lost him forever, he says that he wants to keep risking his life being a hero, even though she had 2 close calls after he came back where she thought that he had died. Once, she thought he would drown, and another time, she thought he was going to die from being shot in the shoulder by a laser. The fear and outrage of him unintentionally putting her through that fear again causes Sally to snap, terrified that he'd be so selfish as to scare her like that. After all, she's seen one tragedy after another, and every time a problem gets resolved and she pulls herself out of her turmoil, another one came right around the corner. For all she knew, Sonic could just get himself killed for real, and she was so upset about the idea of him doing that she lashed out at him for it, even though she was the one being the most selfish. So you see, ever since issue 53, the comic's been building up to this moment. If Sally was a Mary Sue, you'd think she'd by definition have no flaws. So she wouldn't have the kind of human weaknesses in her where she'd end up gradually breaking and cracking under the stress of it all. She'd just shrug it off, like Sonic in the modern Sonic games. She's not just the ace, she's a deconstruction of it, as someone who, as brave and stubborn and competent as she is, can only take so much. And that's what I find fascinating about her. She has so much effort put into her personality that she feels really real, making her personality deep enough for a believable 3-dimensional character. A lot of people who demonize this moment of weakness on Sally and say they took a strange direction with her character don't seem to understand what they were going for with her. I can understand that making a character gradually have an emotional breakdown from stress is a little mature for the Sonic series, but at least they cared enough to try, instead of having the problem of angst, what angst, and having none of the characters get fed up with all the major problems at all. It's more realistic this way, and it makes her more sympathetic and relatable as a character, humanizing her. It's frustrating to me that this was lost on so many people, just because they probably didn't say the word for what she was going through. Even then, Sally's "it completely broke my heart" spelled it out pretty clearly, even without going back to look through like 70 issues worth of foreshadowing. In the next story, we have an actually cool twist right away, as Knuckles actually catches Leonda's son with a cyborg eye, and it's explained that the usefulness of the cyborg eye is the reason why he didn't just get cloned eye replacement. It makes sense that Knuckles would be practical like that and not shy away from an eye that looks weird. Although I still have to wonder why they can't just make cyborg eyes look exactly like regular eyes anyways, since Uncle Chuck's early robot design had him looking just like his normal Mobian form but metallic, for example. But yeah, I'm finally invested in the plot of this arc again. Knuckles asks Sojourner if the satellite monitors are still up and running, explaining that he doesn't have his own setup in the Chaos Chamber because he naturally promised his wife he'd never spy on family. Good, because then he'd be no better than his ancestors. Spectre reminds everyone that they hate Leonda, saying that he wishes that she was in the dungeon, and Sojourner says that he thinks Rutan, her son, needs to be watched. It sure is a good thing that the spy monitors can record sound through invisible microphones to hear Leonda's conversation with Rutan, and not only that, but they can also zoom in. Rutan's girlfriend says that she told her parents she had been staying overnight with Lara Sue. Then Broder compliments how Cobra could hack into the Brotherhood's satellite network, even somehow accidentally. And Broder shows naivety, saying that Leonda's kids seem pretty harmless, and is told that he doesn't know their mother. I call bullshit on the idea that after 25 years, Broder would still have little to no experience with just how evil Leonda's been. The first story was by Carl Bullers, and it's a story about downtime after Eggman's major plan was thwarted, in which the king announces he's going to go on a world tour with Patch as his bodyguard. Also, Sonic realizes he can understand what his pet dog's saying now because of his language implant, which should let him understand Antoine's French too, honestly, which would be interesting if that was brought up. And Sonic gives Tails the message telling him about his parents. Also, we learn that Jules stayed a robot because somehow deroboticizing him brought back his own fatal injuries instead of simply turning the metal replacing his damaged skin into skin and fur, which it should have logically been able to do. So that was bullshit. But I vastly prefer him staying a robot, if only because he looks actually distinct from Sonic that way. Most importantly of all, finally, Sonic and Sally break up. Finally, we get to see how they be with other people. And I couldn't choose a better reason for them to. Sally's about being a queen. She looks forward to being Eggman so she could rule a peaceful kingdom. But Sonic is the exact opposite. He's about thrills, adventure, and satisfyingly destroying as many robots as he can. He lives for fighting villains. So naturally I can't imagine the two as a working couple because Sonic would be bored out of his mind as a king. And a king wouldn't be allowed to keep risking his life fighting evil, would he? Not even criminals in the street. So of course they would break up over this. But even better, they added the extra touch, the extra layer, where Sally was pushed over the edge by intense worry and fear about Sonic actually dying because of his vastly different lifestyle. That gives her more of a motivation to push this issue on him right away, before Eggman can be defeated and force Sonic to accept ruling at her side boringly. Now she has a reason to want to make him stop fighting. She's scared, paranoid, and yes, selfish. Because her fear and anxiety, built up over dozens of issues in a row, have led to her being like that. Being inwardly focused because there's a lot to be inwardly focused on. I especially like how she actively spells out why she's acting like this, with her line about how thinking Sonic was dead for so long completely broke her heart. They didn't have to have lines like that made it so obvious, but they did. It was an emotional breakdown in her, to be blunt. Which is why I'd say that her normally uncharacteristic behavior here was justified. I also really loved how Sonic got angry and stood up for himself. I thought he was just going to be a victim and be all sad and confused. It was surprisingly well written for a moment where a normally pure, righteous goody two-shoes snaps and attacks a friend. Especially when you consider this in the context of the overall comic up to this point, which I had never been able to do before I read it. However, the story is heavily hampered in its enjoyability by the art. What the hell is with those eyes? It's a superficial complaint, but it's one I can't exactly ignore when over and over again I see Sally and other characters with these hideous demonic eyes where they have no corneas, just eyeballs that sometimes morph in shape to represent their emotion. Like the Sad AM cartoon, only worse. Because you have this whole clear part of their face shaped to show that it should be where the whole eyes are taking up, but instead they're just left there. How? That doesn't make any sense. It makes Sally look so unrecognizable this whole issue. Although it does work thematically in that she's kind of a different person now for the time being with all the stress she's under. Let's not even getting into the complaint I was planning on saying that Sally's eyeballs disappear when she's angry. So many different times, which makes the art hard to look at for a long period of time or a short period of time because it just takes me out of it. All I can really think about when I see that is how ridiculous it is and how creepy it makes her look. Would it really have been that hard to draw her eyes? And of course, the art is a superficial complaint, but it's still enough to almost ruin the appeal of the story for me and made going through it a tedious slog, even though the plot is fine. And the second story by Ken Penders was surprisingly good at keeping me invested for the 25 years arc. I was pleasantly surprised that Knuckles actually noticed the kid spying on him, and with a cyborg eye, giving a justification for why he'd accept to look like that, even though it makes him look evil and menacing. Sadly, we don't see the kids telling Leah and Dad about the whole weather thing in the sky, which would have been interesting. I also really like the idea that Knuckles promised Julie that he wouldn't spy on his family, since that would make him no better than his father and the entire Guardian lineup before him. He put an end to the guardianship for a reason, although that really does bring up the question of, do members of the Guardian family still train their kids in the art Guardian magic? Because if they don't, that's really stupid, and Knuckles should have known how vulnerable it would make Angel Island not having any kid that's really skilled at magical arts. Since, you know, the Brotherhood's all gonna die of old age eventually. Because he did some time travel and saw Angel Island get taken over by Eggman specifically because he prevented the guardianship from being formed. You'd think he would have learned his lesson from that. Well, I don't show up
don't criticize.